Good morning everybody, this is Stephen Pugh bringing you the woodworking course level 3, and we're going to be talking about traditional roof construction today and also methods of building roofs. The first thing we need to know is that there are three definite ways in which cut roofs are made. A cut roof is a roof that's cut physically by hand on every piece. That's what a cut roof is. And it's different to a truss roof, which comes as completed items that are just assembled into place one after another. And you'll notice that we have a single roof, we have a double roof, and we have a triple roof. Single, double and triple, and these are the common ways in which we talk about them. And we have a number of roof shapes. These are the shapes of roof. Now we've got the flat roof, we've got a lean-to roof, so this is a roof that leans against a building. Then we've got the mono-pitch roof, which is a roof that only has a roof going up in one direction. And then we have the gable roof. This is a roof that has a normal roof that goes up in two directions. And then we have the hip end roof, So this is a roof that goes up in, and it also has at two ends a roof traveling in the opposite direction. Then we have the mansard roof. Now the mansard roof, I've drawn that a little bit more carefully for you. If you can imagine, this is the roof here, and halfway through we take a compass and we swing a circle of the compass right round to the other side, and then at the top and halfway across there and halfway across there we draw a straight line, another straight line, another straight line, and another straight line, and that gives you the shape of a mansard roof. They're exceptionally wind resistant and very popular near to seaside places where they're likely to get high storms. What that means is that this open space in the top is generally the third floor or even the second floor, and there's lots of space for rooms up the top. And then we have a gable edge roof, which is this one. We have a jerking head roof, and then we have this one here, which is very common. It's called a valley roof. So it's two gable ends coming in together, and there's a valley between the two. So those are your basic roof shapes. And one of the words that we need to know about when we're talking about roofs is what's called live loads and imposed loads or superimposed loads. A live load is the amount of weight that's on the walls from the roof. So you would take all of the wood and all of the nails and all of the fittings and the slates and the battens and everything, and they would be worked out according to weight, and then that weight would be the live load. That is the actual amount of mass that's pushing down on the walls. And now a superimposed load is exactly the same weight, but we add to it the weight of snow. Generally it's snow that's the one thing that we add to the weight. So a superimposed load then can be very, very heavy indeed. Imagine 4 to 5 tons of snow on top of a roof, and that then is the superimposed load. Now we're going to talk about the different types of roof. We're going to talk about the single roof first. So let's get that one up. Now the single roof, a very, very simple thing. It's a couple roof, it's called, and it is a roof that goes up from one wall up to the top and comes down to the other side, and there's another wall. Now these are the two wall plates. They're made of wood and they go on the top of the walls to nail to, and then of course the two rafters are nailed into each other into the ridge board. And of course that's, if it's a very thin piece of material, that's called a wedge board. But if it's a wider material, that's called a ridge beam. Two different words. Now the next one we're going to look at, that's a couple roof. This is called a close couple roof. Now it looks very similar. It's got a wall here, it's got a wall plate, and you've got a rafter going up and a ridge board and coming down again. Excuse my drawing, they're not always the best. But what it has is a tie beam or a roof tie going across. Sometimes they'll have a hanger, that is another piece of timber going up the middle, but not always. The most important thing about close couple is that it is tied from wall to wall. This prevents the walls from spreading by the weight of the roof. That's called a close couple roof. So you've got a couple roof and a close couple roof. Now the next one is called a collard roof. A collard roof. Now a collard roof is very similar to the last one, the close couple. It has a wall just the same each side. It has rafters going up, but you'll see there's a collar which is high up in the roof. High up in the roof. And there is a particular measurement that is understood, generally understood as being the appropriate amount. I think it's something like about, I think it's a third maximum that you go up to the collared roof. Okay, and this is called a collar tie. A collar tie. Okay, so those are all the single. Now a double roof, okay, is like this. You say, what's double? Well, what's double about it is the fact that you've got two openings. You've got an opening here and an opening here. So this is an internal wall, and that's a wall. So you've got three walls, 1, 2, and 3. So you've got two opening spaces. That's why it's a double roof. A double roof. So the rafters are going up as normal, okay, but on this roof, on this at the top of this wall here, where the wall plate is, you've got first of all you've got a roof tie going across, or sometimes it's just sailing joists, and then you've got another piece of timber on the top, and you've got struts going up, and you've also got hangers coming down, and this produces an exceptionally strong construction. And it's very, very popular. Now there is another type of roof which is called a triple roof. So that's a double because it's got two open spaces. Now you've got a triple roof, but this time it's not about putting in an extra wall. There's no extra wall in the middle. It's to do with how the roof is constructed. And let me have a look at some of the names of these things. You've got obviously the ridge board at the top. Okay. You've got a common rafter. Okay, on the outside is the common rafter, and then inside that you've got what's called the principal rafter. You've got two rafters, one on the outside and one on the inside. You've also got in the middle what's called a king post. So this is a very substantial piece of material, and it goes across the tie beam. So there's a tie beam going across. Okay, the king post sits on the top. Okay, and from the king post we have struts going across, one there and one here, and between the principal rafter and the common rafter there's a space, and in that space there's room for a purlin. Now a purlin is a beam of timber that goes down the length of a roof but halfway up, and the particular point about that is this, is that if this is supported in the middle, okay, it means that this common rafter can be of lighter material because it's only got to stretch across a short distance. Okay, it's not stretching all the way up, it's stretching across a short distance, and that means that you can use lighter material. So yes, you use heavier material here, a heavier material for the king post, but then after that all the other items of material are lighter, and this is an exceptionally sophisticated way of building a roof. If you go into churches, if you go into ancient buildings, you'll find the triple roof is very common. Now we've mentioned an awful lot of words and phrases like triple roof and purlins, and all these things, all these words have to be learnt, and in roofing there are probably about 25 different words that are really important to learn in relation to building roofs. Okay, and a lot of people specialize in building roofs, it's all they ever do. Okay, other people specialize in doing foundations, and that's all they ever do. Other people specialize in hanging doors, and that's all they ever do. But the main thing is this, is that all these words are words to be learnt, and they're all special words. So when you're on a site and someone says, go and get me a saddle board, or go and get me a valley rafter, or go and get me a cripple rafter, or go and get me a collar tie, all these phrases are phrases that just have to be learnt. Okay, and there's no way around it. It's something that just has to be done. Now this is a drawing here of some eaves, and this is the most common eaves. It's called the boxed eaves. Now a boxed eave means that on the outside of the building you have a fascia and you have a soffit underneath. That soffit has to be out of fireproof material. Traditionally that was asbestos, but nowadays it can be something that won't burn. It can be a plastic that's non-combustible. On the front of the soffit you've got your guttering that takes the rainwater away from the roof and dumps it well away from the building. Underneath, and then you've got your main rafter going up. There's your main rafter, and here is your wall plate. Now the wall plate is always on the inner wall, never on the outer wall. This outer wall comes up here, and once it's in this space it tends to be cut off, and that's it. Okay, so the wall plate is on the inner wall, so it's dry, kept dry. This is your rafter coming down. This is the cutout, which is called the bird's mouth. The vertical cut is called the plumb cut, like it is here, and the cut that's horizontal is called the seat cut. It sits on top of the wall plate. Now you'll notice that there's a little filler piece in here. That's called a fillet. Okay, and what this does, as the water comes rushing down the roof, it causes it to slow down a little bit before it pops into the guttering. That little fillet is important. If you see a building without a fillet piece, then you'll discover that that's not been correctly built. You'll also notice you've got your tiles or slates laid on, but you'll also notice this yellow portion here. Now just underneath the yellow portion will be a very thin layer, generally of asbestos or some other material. Maybe it won't be asbestos, but it'll be, in an old building it would be asbestos, but in a new building it might be just a fireproof material. But this little piece underneath here, it overhangs the edge of the building, and so do the tiles. And where the tiles and that small fillet, that small overhang is filled with cement. Not a hard cement, something that's a fairly soft cement, because obviously the wood and the tiles can move a tiny bit. We don't want the cement just falling out the first time anything moves. Now there's other ways of doing eaves. This is called boxed eaves. These stick out over the building, but also you can have flush eaves. So flush eaves is where this fascia is right up against the brickwork here, so within about 5mm space, and then it just goes straight up. And there's another way which is called open eaves. Now open eaves look a little bit like this, but they tend to come down a little bit further. They come down to here, and then there's no fascia and no soffit. Okay, now the purpose of open eaves is that they look pretty. Okay, they look pretty with all the little tails, as we call them, sticking out over the building. This looks much more tidy, but for ultimate tidiness, then flush eaves is what people do. Okay, so these are just some of the things that we need to know about when we're constructing roofing. Now it's very important, okay, very important that you learn the technical terms. Just learn the technical terms. Find out the names of everything. Be able to be fully conversant. Learn the language of roofing. And also practice your roof. Practice cut roofs. Whenever there's an opportunity, practice a cut roof. If you've got a bit of spare time, you might want to make a little model for yourself and learn all the names and all the cuts associated with erecting a cut roof. And here, don't get confused. Don't get confused. Now there's almost a massive industry in people explaining to you how to do a cut roof. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to simplify this down to just a few methods. The first thing we need to know about cut roofs is that we need to calculate. We need to make calculations. And to make calculations, we have to have certain key words. The first key word we have is span. And this, this span is the distance from the outside, okay, of the wall plate on this side to the outside of the wall plate on that side. And then we have the run, or the half run, which goes from the same place again to the center, and from the same place to the center. So the run is, or a half run, is half the distance across the whole roof. And then we have what's called the rise. Okay, the rise is from the surface of the wall plate to the top of the roof. It's not quite to the top of the roof, but we can explain that further in further detail. It's just slightly below. the top of the roof. Okay, so those are the basic things, and this angle here, or this ratio, okay, is called the pitch. That's the pitch of the roof. Now then, there are a number of methods, okay, and I want to talk about the full size set out first. That is the way that I always construct a cut roof. You say, well, how can you do a full size set out? Well, very conveniently, the roof already, when I arrive, generally has the wall plate in place. And if you can imagine that that wall plate has been constructed in such a way that that's the footprint of the roof. Okay, that's the footprint. So from one side to the other is the complete span. All I need to do then is to measure along those two sides the overall rise of the roof. And now what I've got is a full size diagram, a full size diagram. I haven't had to measure it, I haven't had to do anything except to just put on the overall rise. Then what I do is I find the middle of the end of the building, and I can lay a piece of rafter across, and I can immediately get all of the plumb cuts and the seat cuts immediately. And I will check that on both sides, and I will check it in as many ways as I feel I need to check it. And then what I can do is I can use that single piece to be a pattern for making all the rest. And I will just chuck out a whole load of rafters exactly the same size when I know that the pattern is perfectly correct. This is what's called a full size set out. Okay. Now another way of doing this is what's called a scale drawing, and some people prefer to do a set out of a roof like that. I don't use a full scale drawing, and the reason for that, because of the propensity to very slight error. If you imagine you're going to do a massive roof and you're going to try and condense it onto a small piece of paper, now no matter how accurate you will be, it still will be very slightly inaccurate. Okay, so you might be able to get your degrees correct, you might be able to get your proportions correct, but it is obviously scaled down. And when you scale something down, it's very difficult to measure dead measurements. Another way of doing this is called the roofing square or the speed square. Now the roofing square, I think it's an English invention, is a piece of steel in an L shape, and across that piece of steel we put two pieces of wood. And I use nuts and bolts on them, just little wing nuts, so I can move it into the correct position, and then when it's in the correct rise and the correct run, I can just tweak them, and that becomes the fixed way of doing all the plumb cuts and the seat cuts. Okay, another way of doing it is called the speed square. We'll look at both of these in a little bit more detail in a minute. Now I'll put a little star there. The speed square, I think, is an American invention, and in America the way in which they take on a roof is a little bit different to what we do in the English world in the UK, but I think in some senses it's better, but in other senses it's just very slightly inferior. Okay, and then lastly we have the Ready Reckoner. Now a lot of people can get a little book. They're quite expensive to buy, a little book. It looks like a diary, and you can turn to that book and you can find all of the lengths of the common rafters according to their run and according to their height. So that's a useful little tool. Also, on your mobile phone today, you might have a Ready Reckoner already there. So you can put in the run or you can put in the rise, and it'll give you everything that you need to know. However, okay, if your phone dies, then you're stuck to build the roof. So it's always good to be able to do it in the simpler methods. And in fact, I always do a roof in the full size set out mode. Now, I want to talk about the American system. Now in America, they have what's called, they'll say, oh, it's an 8 roof or a 6 roof or a 4 roof or a 10 roof. What they mean by that isn't that it's just 10 inches high. What they mean is that it's in the ratio of 12 to 6 or 12 to 8 or 12 to 7 or 12 to 5 or 12 to 4. And they will say, I'm going to do a number 4 roof. And what they mean is it's 12 inches across and 4 inches up. And that's the proportion. That's the pitch of the roof. And of course, they've invented the speed square to enable you to do that. This is an exceptionally handy piece of equipment if you know how to use it. It's a basic square, as you can see, and at the bottom it has a small fence that's both up and down, so you can sit on the edge of the tip there. And what you'll notice all the numbers coming down here, and you'll notice numbers going across here and numbers going up here. But the most important thing is what's in the center. Everything pivots on this point, and if it pivots on this point, it means it can be turned. So you put it onto the side of the wood and you pivot it, okay? And you pivot it according to these numbers here. So if you're doing a 12/6 roof, you pivot it to where it says number 6. And once you hit the number 6, it will automatically give you your plumb cuts and your seat cuts, okay? And you can just pick it up every time, move it to number 6 and strike the plumb cut and the seat cut. Okay, so that's very, very handy. But that's handy as long as you're not on something that's in between a 6 and a 7, or in between a 4 and a 5. Okay, then you might have to then revert to the protractor, which is a little bit more complex. And you say, well, that's good for the common rafter. What about the hip rafter? Well, they're on here. So if you're on a 6 here, then you then look at these numbers and you adjust it slightly till you find number 6 on here. So if you're going to be on a 6 roof, a 12/6 roof, you go 6 there and you go 6 here. These will be the common rafter shape, the vertical and seat cut, and these will be the hip angles, obviously for vertical and for seat cut. It doesn't work out the length, okay? It only works out the angles. So is that okay? That's the pitches. It works out the pitches. Then we have another thing, which is the roofing square. Now the roofing square, I believe, is the ultimate way of understanding how to do a roof. Some people find it very difficult to understand. It basically is a very solid piece of steel with numbers all the way along them. And some of them, they will have a series along here, a series of calculations to enable you to work out the lengths of timber. All right. And I don't want to go into too much complicated details at the moment. This is more learnt by doing it than by talking about it. But you'll notice here you've got your seat cut, which is the one where it sits on top of the wall plate, and then you've got your plumb cuts, which plumb always means something that's vertical, like with a plumb bob. And those are the vertical cuts, and that's another vertical cut, and this then is the seat cut, the one that's horizontal. Now then, some of you may be saying, I'm confused now, Stephen. I understand. Learn to make a cut roof doing it in a real size set out. Always do it in a real size set out. Use the whole of the wall plate as your full size drawing, and that to me never fails. All of these methods can be slightly difficult, slightly confusing, but when you do it on a full size drawing, then you'll find you'll understand it perfectly well. Anyway, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.